Uki Juchi Meto Chang Rira Vinci Yunde Kimpadi Sange Shindu Nite Luwagi Rokun Nanda Shingla Drupasho Yang Gururatna Mandala Kamyatayani Sange Chudam Soki Choknamba Jamchu Bardu Dapni Kyasuchi Daki Chinye Yupe Sunanki Drola Penchir Sange Drupasho Sange Chudam Soki Choknamba Jamchu Bardu Dapni Kyasuchi Daki Chinye Yupe Sunanki Drola Penchir Sange Drupasho Sange Chudam Soki Choknamba Jamchu Bardu Dapni Kyasuchi Daki Chinye Kipe Sunanki Drola Venture Sange Drupasho.
Just get into a nice, comfortable meditative position. We're going to do a short little meditation to start. Okay. Ground the base of your knees and relax your shoulders and kind of bring your shoulders back a little bit. And sometimes that makes just make sure you're nice and comfortable. And just make sure that you're not tilting forward. Sometimes I have a tendency, I notice, where I tilt forward. So bring your weight back and make sure you're nicely centered on your vertebrae. So your vertebrae stacked one on top of each other. And you'll feel that sweet spot. Rest your tongue on the top of your mouth. Relax your eyes. Bring in your tummy so it's not too firm, but not loose. And start taking breaths in and out of your nose with your attention at the tip of your nose. Relax your mouth. Relax your forehead. Release the tension in your shoulders. And do a quick scan of your body. Just get a feel of how your body is feeling tonight. Hot, cold, achy, sticky, crampy. Start from the top of your head and work your way down and just assess and make notes of the state and the condition and the feeling of your body. When you're finished, bring your attention again to the tip of your nose, observing the sensation of the air moving in and out. And start observing your thoughts rising one by one and releasing one by one. You can use the sensations of the fan, even noise in the room, things that have happened today, things that you're thinking about tomorrow, that itch you're feeling at the tip of your nose. But whatever that thought is, let it rise and then let it pass. And let the next one rise and let it pass. We're going to stay here for a few minutes. Make sure you let the thought pass. Now I want you to think about one or two things that are your biggest afflictions right now. So one or two things that are bothering you the most, agitating you, worrying you, creating fear, anxiety, stress, whatever that is. And bring the first thing in front of you. It could be an object, it could be a thought, it could be a person, but bring that one thing in your life that's driving you crazy right in front of you. And feel it for a minute here. And you know what that is. The thing that seems to be occupying most of your mental space during the day when it's not focused on other things it should be doing. think about that one thing in front of you. And I just want you to breathe in light and exhale and release. You can do it again if you need. Just breathe in, thinking about that object, and just think of light and exhale. If there's another one that's also on your bucket list of driving you crazy, bring that on and do the same thing again. When you're ready, take a couple of last breaths, inhaling and exhaling through your nose, and then you can open your eyes. How was that? Was that okay? That was nice? Was it hard or not very interesting? Feedback?
I think you need to speak up a little more.
Oh, was it hard to hear me? You okay?
I heard it
You heard me?
was a great
Did you like it?
I enjoyed it and it relaxed me and let go of things.
Yeah, that's good. How was it for you?
That's good. I feel like the afflictions sometimes are hard to like picture,
Oh,
you know? 'Cause
lucky
it's
you.
like-
Mine are very graphic, but yes, okay.
Because if it's something like intangible, then
Yeah,
It's conceptual. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to,
Yeah.
Same thing. It's,
Yeah.
It makes you work.
yeah. If it's a feeling that you have,
yeah.
if it's not grounded by a person or an object
Right.
or like whatever, right?
Yeah.
Try doing the meditation again this week and just start seeing how it evolves, because things start to actually change and you'll notice it actually changing rather quickly. I was thinking last week, someone was saying in class that they had so many thoughts happen, like one after another. And at some point when you're actually doing the practice on your own, you, like at least for me and from the things that I've heard from other practitioners, there's a point where the thoughts just start winding down. Like in the beginning, it's really fast for me, or there's a lot of different things on my list. And usually my list ends up being a combination of worry lists, anxiety, and then to do, like all kind of clumped in together. And then at some point, it just starts to slow, like I'm searching for something and it starts to slow down. And in that moment when it starts to slow down is when I really take and I close it with bringing something that really is kind of irking me the most, and watching that. And it is just, it's like it's not like a Tonglen for those of you who know Tonglen. It really just is a light that comes and you release it. It's very simple and it feels almost so simple that you wonder, at least I wonder, the effect of the actual meditation. But if you do it every day, you will see the benefit of it. The other thing that I'm going to encourage you as well is meditate every day. Like really just do it. Do it even 5 minutes, because what ends up happening is it's like I have girlfriends who have personal trainers and they're like, I'm not ever losing weight. But the only time they work out is when they see their personal trainer. So one day a week, they see their personal trainer for 90 minutes. And then every other day they eat really, really poorly and they don't exercise. And they wonder why the hell they're not losing weight. And they feel like they're wasting their money because they spend all this money on their personal trainer and there's no effect. And the fact is that it's the same thing with being in class too. Like you'll get your dose of it and it feels good. And you will start to get you'll think about these concepts, but it is something that you have to do a little bit every day. And 5 minutes, we all have that to spare. Like I have mornings where I wake up and I'm thinking, oh, I have so much stuff to do that I don't have time to meditate. I woke up late, I'm running late. It's, I can't be doing it. And the thing is that it is the one thing that you can actually do that could make your entire life easier. And it's so simple. I mean, it's not even like the one thing that you can do that will make it can make your day better, but it will actually start to transform the way your mind starts to function, and it will actually change the way your life is. And I don't know. I mean, I remember teachers for years always telling me the importance of meditating, and I'm like, I knew, and I had like Christian guilt to it too. Like, I feel really guilty that I didn't, and I tried all these different strategies, like, putting my like where I would meditate really close to my bed so I'd roll out of it, or doing it different times of the day. But and I think about, like, I have this book that I've bought for a bunch of friends of mine called The One Thing. It's a philosophy. I don't know if you know, like, if you're into self-help books, it's really quite lovely and amazing. But a dear friend of mine gave it to me, who's a practitioner. And when I was feeling really overwhelmed with all the things that I was doing in my life, I had too many things going on. And he said, here, I have a book for you. And he gave it to me, and it's called The One Thing. And when you read it, it's brilliant, but very simple. And the concept at the end is really, how do you strategically find the one thing in your life, in a particular thing that you're doing, that will make everything in your life much easier. So it's really about efficiency, right? So like, if you have a list of, like, we have these to-do lists in our minds, or I carry a notebook that you'll see me with, that I'm, like, obsessed with my to-do list. But when you have a list of things that you do, you don't really, most people don't prioritize what their to-do list is, right? Like laundry could be on the same plane as like filing for your taxes. You know what I mean? Like it's like it almost, it's like you kind of do, and then you kind of procrastinate on the other thing. And so the book actually talks about what is the one thing that you do that would make everything else much easier. So you learn to be much more strategic. And I thought about that because that's what meditation actually allows you to do. It's something that you can do for 5 minutes, first thing in the morning or right before you go to bed, whichever works for you, whatever your lifestyle is. And it will start to impact the way you start to think every day. Okay. So just, don't be hard on yourself if you're not doing it every day, but make the effort to do it. Okay. So I'm starting with that. It was just something I thought about this morning, where I was like, you guys gotta meditate, all of you. It's important. It's important. Okay, so we are going to start with the quiz. How are you guys all feeling? Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna have one group of people who are feeling like they're having a really, really great day over here. People that are feeling like it's not such a great day, could have been better, in the middle. And those of us that are feeling like, so we have great day, bad day, and kind of not feeling either or, like it's very much in the middle of the road over here. Okay, great, like terrible, I wouldn't say terrible, but bad, and then in the middle of the road. Sound good? Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm having a great day.
No.
Oh.
That's all I have.
What does it say?
Oh, here's a better copy.
You didn't read it.
Define what it means, what is meant by cycle of life of sorrow. Oh no, I have the wrong quiz. You know what? I'm sorry, I have the wrong quiz. I have quiz 5, not 4. So what I'm gonna do is turn it on the back, and I'll give you the questions for quiz 4. I'm sorry. It's pretty. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can print it, but I'll tell you guys it. You can just write the answers. I'll actually put it up on the screen. So let's see if I can.
I got it. You want to listen to the question? List the 3 requirements of a good student as found in our
Well, can you say that out loud?
List the 3 requirements of a good student as found in R. Davis 400 verses. 3 requirements of a good student.
There it is.
That's the whole thing.
No, that's the first question. Oh no,
No, I think
That's
the
it.
whole thing.
that's the whole thing.
It's the only question.
Just question. It's the only question.
The only question.
List the 3 requirements of a good student as found in Ayurveda's 400 verses. There you go.
Anybody hear that?
Partial.
Yeah.
Number 1.
I already know.
I didn't write the context, I just wrote. Yeah.
Oh,
You ready for the
Second
Second one, you remember? I'm sorry? There's 3 Look.
Wait, what's
It says here, especially in spiritual things.
Impartial means free of preconceptions.
Yeah, I think that you're not satisfied. It's having high spiritual aspirations. Kind of not satisfied with the way things are. Willing to work.
willing to, willing to strive.
I also have in my notes, it says it will not be easy. That's it.
Yeah.
Next day, intelligence, desire,
No, that's it.
Got it?
The timeline.
That means you do this.
Tuesday, partiality.
It's almost.
I'm on the, like, somebody comes to you and says something.
Your name is spelled too? Oh, I'm Erica, that's easy. And Nova? Okay. Erica. I'm sorry, Amy. There might have been an Amy in here at one point. Actually, I think you're right. Wait, so the other AC, like, you
Do they teach the whole series?
I'm sorry,
Do they teach the whole series of AC like 1 to 14?
we are up to 14 now.
Oh wow, so
We've
this
been doing
year,
it for
like,
5 years.
oh wow.
And we just finished this year's one class that Hector and I were in, and we went through all 8 times, which took us 7 years.
So you've been studying it because
Just finished this. Yeah, but it's in this education here.
Wow, but each course is like 10 classes, right?
Each course is 10 classes, plus it's usually
There's usually more.
it's usually
So you guys have been doing this for like how long?
the original class.
Does anyone know what the catalog is?
The original classes, what's their American? Translated from all. Who was the one?
He became a gesture, and this is essentially his gesture course.
What's a gesture?
It's like a hospital theology exam.
Oh, that's really
It takes 20 years. This is what you learn. This is what you learn to become a gesture, but it's still down. It's like,
Yeah.
you ever saw like classics,
So,
entire gesture course. 20 years cycle, he's still better.
and he made it in like the 90s.
Taught it in the 1980s. Was in another one was John Stillwell, came here, started teaching someone all the way through
So is this like one
This road with
kind of like this, or are there
and
other?
then you have
So here,
back.
like the AC classes, are there AC classes, are there other classes in the US, like other distilled down versions too?
There's a lot of people who teach the different lineages of Buddhism, but these are, as far as I know, the only formal structured class that was entire Geshe degree that's been offered to the layperson.
My girlfriend's stepmom.
And the one when John started in 2009. People come in all the way through.
All right, is everyone ready?
Yes.
Okay. So who wants to start with the first one? Happy people. The happy group?
We had a great day, that was really happy.
You had a great day.
Learn how to be happy.
That's good. I'm into that.
Cornerstone.
What is it?
Cornerstone.
Cornerstay?
Remember?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what's another way? This is all three of them together. What was the other way of saying it? Yes, impartial. Yeah, that's right. So the first one was impartial. What's the second one? Intelligent. And what was the last one? Aspires to the highest goal. Okay, cool. Nice, easy peasy. Go ahead and turn in your homeworks. Or not your homeworks, your quizzes. So I'm glad we're all on the same page because that's what a student is supposed to be, which would be all of us here. Thank you, thank you. So I want to congratulate you, first of all. We are starting class 5 today, which means we're halfway through. That's super exciting. Before we start class 5, I do want, Richard, last week, you had asked a question that I said yes to, and then I went home and I was like, I need to actually double check.
I know what this question is.
What's the question?
I wasn't clear when it's Kangir,
Tangier?
Tangir, or or commentary, because some of the commentaries are in fact Tangiers, I believe.
No, the commentaries will be the commentaries on the Tengier.
Okay.
So the
when's
question
the
you-
last Tangier? Who's the last
Well,
writing?
so
on the
so
Tangier?
the the question that you had asked specifically that I was looking into, but I can give you more information about the Congier and Tengier if you'd like. Because the Tengier is written by multiple writers. It's not
For
one.
example, the stages of the path by Atisha.
Yeah.
Is that in the Tangier?
I don't know, but I can check.
And Jason Kappa, is that in the
Okay, so that's a good question.
Yeah.
So
The way I
when,
understand it is the Congo is spoken by the Buddha.
that's right.
Yeah.
And the Tanger is spoken by a human being.
The
So-
Tengier is the
Somebody who's not.
So Jason Kappa,
The-
is a human being.
the
but
te-
if it starts with, I heard it said, or thus it was said, or thus I heard, it means someone heard the
That makes it a comment?
Buddha, no, if someone says thus I heard, it means they
It's not a
heard the Buddha
translation.
say it. So that means it's
That's different than a
Tengier.
commentary.
But that's what I'm saying, what I've heard, it's spoken by the Buddha or spoken by a human being. If I'm saying,
Okay,
I
so-
heard it say,
Yeah.
it's being spoken by
So
a
here,
human
here's
being.
what it
Can I just
is.
say one thing before you?
No, let me finish
Okay.
and then you guys can let me know if if you're
Yeah,
confused. The Congier is spoken by the Buddha. The Tengier is a commentary on the Congier. Okay, so it's not that it was spoken by them, but it's a commentary on it. However, the question that you had asked originally last week was, are the three principal paths in the Tengier?
Right.
And technically, they're not in the Tengier. The three principal paths were written in the Sungbum, 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 that was written by Jason Koppa. So Jason Koppa wrote a commentary called the Sungbum, which was a commentary on the Tengier. And what he did from there was distill the top 3 points that he, in his commentary, was saying that are the 3 principal paths that we are learning today. Does that make sense?
It so makes
So-
sense, and here's the reason I was gonna
Yeah.
say, to address what Paul was saying. In this book here,
Yeah.
it says, thus I have heard,
Yeah.
infers that
hmm
the author heard it directly from the Buddha, in which case it'd be Conger. In other words, the Buddha never wrote anything himself. After his
That's
death, all these people
Yeah.
wrote down exactly what
That's
he said.
right. That's
And
right.
So they always started off with the sentence, thus I have
That's
heard,
right.
meaning I heard the Buddha
Yeah.
directly say it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He
I
didn't
think-
write it himself.
I'll
Yeah.
find it for next class. I'll tell you exactly.
So for the Conger, it would be something where it says like thus I heard or whatever, like how like Plato would write what
Right.
Sophocles said. or
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a really nice
Okay.
analogy. Yeah. Right. And another thing that I learned that I want to share with you because I found it to be really beautiful and amazing is that the Tibetan, so originally the Congier was written in Sanskrit, right? The Tengier, I believe, was originally written in Sanskrit and later translated fully. The full canon was translated into Tibetan. And the Tibetan
From
language,
Sanskrit to Tibetan.
yeah, the Tibetan language didn't actually even exist. They actually created the language in order to do the translation for the Tengier, which I think is just,
Yeah,
You
I'll tell
mean
you,
it wasn't written?
that's right. They
So
had
they created
verbal,
an alphabet.
they had verbal
They had a
language, but it wasn't
verbal,
yeah,
universal.
right.
In other
Yeah.
words, in different places in Tibet,
Right,
they
right,
had
right, right, right.
words
Yeah.
for the same thing.
and they were the only ones who actually documented the Tengier into Tibetan. So that's why sometimes you'll hear that Tibetan is a very holy language, and that's the reason why it actually came into existence for the purpose and the reason to be able to document the Tengier.
What
So-
language, are we talking about the written language or the spoken language?
The written
Tibetan
language, the written
The
language.
written
Yeah.
Tibetan,
Well,
okay.
Yeah, the alphabet.
Right.
In some ways, both, because the spoken language adopted to the new
Sure.
writing, and it also unified the entire country. In the same way, Shakespeare became the language of English
Right,
speaking
yeah,
people. Yeah. And before it was like a bunch of different stuff. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. I don't know. I thought that was, anyway.
They covered that in the first reading.
Parts of it.
Can you repeat the sun bump, whatever you said it was that?
Yeah.
Jason Kappa's.
The Sungbum is the commentary of the Tengier by Jason Koppa. That's where he speaks about the 3 principal paths.
What language is the Congier in?
The conjure is in Sanskrit.
Oh,
And there's one other language that often is referred to, Pali,
Oh, I
which
don't know.
is, I'm not sure if it's simultaneous to Sanskrit or a little bit after or before.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Pali?
Pali, P-A-L-I.
How is it Greek language?
Yeah,
I don't know. But I won't.
but it's like Asian islands,
Got it.
right? And farther east.
So would this mean that Jason Kappa's interpretation of Atisha's lamp on the path, the lamrim of Atisha,
Mm,
was Atisha's lamrim in the Tangira, I wonder?
I don't know.
Because
I wonder.
if the Sanbun
Uh-huh.
is commentary of the Tangira, it's definitely commentary on Atisha. So
Yeah.
might be.
could probably look it up on the Google.
Yeah.
I'll find out.
Yeah.
That took me a while to, I have to say, for me to get that information, I had to go through 3 different people and it had to be translated twice. Like one teacher had it and then I was like, what? I don't even know what you're saying. And so then I sent it to someone else and I was like, can you explain what he's saying? Because I don't get it. And then he just sent me an email. And then I spoke to another friend of mine. I was like, I feel like I'm crazy because I'm not really, it's like they're all speaking. I see the English language, but it's not like, it was so bizarre. Like, you know, sometimes you send emails and you ask questions and they
Yeah.
never respond to that
Yeah.
email. That's what I felt like. But I was like, I don't get it. It's like, and I thought it was a joke. Like all these people were all in on it. Just like, I was like, this is, anyway, okay.
Thank you.
So, there's that. There's a question that you had asked Emmett a couple weeks ago about getting a translation in Sanskrit, which is on my radar, and I have my dear Sanskrit friends actually looking into it, so I will get back to you. But it's on my, trust me, I take your questions all very seriously.
Thank you, Judy.
Of course, of course. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about samsara and renunciation. I'll be honest, I'm really nervous about today's class because those are very heavy topics. So we'll see how this goes. Can we first say korwa?
Korwa.
Okay, korwa. Korwa is, the translation of korwa is samsara, but korwa actually means circle or cycle. Sometimes it's more like circle, actually. They'll say it's, the core actually means circle and the wa is what makes it a verb. And so then, but the translation of korwa is samsara. Okay, so we're going to be talking a little bit, not a little bit, we'll be talking about samsara a lot today.
So the etymology of how that is written is that there is a character for the thing and then a character for what type of thing it is.
I have no idea,
Because you see pa,
but it seems
wa.
that way.
Yeah.
But actually, I couldn't say yes. I could say from what we've been observing, that seems like the case. But
It was translated by someone that had perceived emptiness was of that.
what was translated?
The written language, the language that was created by the, I'm gonna call him courtesan monk that was sent by the king, I suppose.
Oh,
at the
yes.
time.
Yes.
Yeah.
He created the language with the cave and the rock and all that sort of stuff that collapsed. So he created the written version of it, which we're reading a translation of here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And I see the hyphens
Yeah.
everywhere, and I see a lot of repeated
Yes,
syllables. and
that's
it
right.
Probably means something.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Do you know-
core
Mhm.
is circle, the
Yeah.
thing,
Yes.
and wa
Wa is
is not necessarily cycle.
No.
Cycle is core wa.
yes.
So wa is
The translation of korwa would be circle technically
Mhm.
together, but the core is actually what is a circle or a wheel.
Okay.
And wa is what makes it a verb. So that's how the word becomes a
Circle?
Mhm.
Circling.
Mhm.
And
Cycle, like
Circling,
cyclic,
Circling
cycle.
is a verb.
verbs, the cycle.
So I don't know if it's
Yeah.
a separate character or
Yeah.
not, but it's.
Yeah.
Think of how you just add syllables
Yeah.
onto words and change it.
But it's interesting
They
because
always
when,
hyphenate it in our translation.
mm-hmm,
That's all.
To like help us pronounce
mm-hmm.
it. Hyphens are part of
But even what I've just told you is from 3 different people that I've heard it from. You know, so the way I've heard it first time was that it meant circle in general, or cycle, or the cycle of life. The second way I heard it was from someone who is a scholar, or I should say scholar. He at the time was studying a lot of Tibetan, and he broke it down of kor meaning circle and wa meaning that it was a verb. The way Geshe Michael has talked about it, he talks about it korwa in general in conjunction together. I've never heard him break it down as meaning circle or cycle. That's the best I can do for you. But you know what? I do think you should study Tibetan.
How would one do that in this
it.
milieu?
I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, maybe that's something we look into. We have a few students actually here that are incredible with Tibetan.
I'm talking Kaya.
I know. I wonder if she'll do it.
You could do it in that milieu.
And she's studying.
Yeah. Actually, it's because of her that I remember that.
Is there an
Breakdown.
ACI?
I can, I
On
can
the ACI
find out.
website,
Should find out.
there's an ACI Dharma.
Yeah.
I think there might be a Tibetan
Course.
Recorded.
Is there? That might be worth looking into.
It might go better if we had someone leading it though than we just
Yeah.
reading it
Can you
ourselves.
ask her and see? That might be something nice for some of the students in general that have really are into learning the language.
Or she didn't know where to go.
Yeah. It'd be nice if they had something here too. So samsara is what we have renunciation about. Okay. Or it's the thing that we have renunciation towards. A lot of people think that samsara is a place. If you ever hear it as a place, like, you know, New York City is samsara, I'll leave New York and then I'll be out of it. It doesn't really work that way. It'd be nice if it did, but it's not a place, it's not a location. It's a condition, and we'll talk more about that later. The point of renunciation is to get out of kora. Okay. So we'll be talking a lot about the relationship of renunciation to samsara and why those two work together, or how they work together and what their relationship is. But really the ultimate, goal of Buddhism is to escape samsara, right? That's the ultimate goal that we're all striving for. The definition of samsara are in these 2 lines. So can we say sakche,
Sakche.
nirlen,
Nirlen.
gi,
Gi.
pungpo,
Pongpoi.
gyon,
Young,
yangne,
Yangne.
yangdu,
Yanggu.
lenpani,
Lenpani.
korwa,
Korwa.
yin.
Yin.
Let's say that one more time. Sakche,
Sakche.
nirlengi,
Nirlengi.
pungpo,
Pongpo.
gyun yangne,
Yun Yangne.
yangdu,
Yanggu.
lenpani,
Lenpani.
korwa yin.
Korwa Yin.
Okay, so we'll just break this down. Sakche means stain or an impurity. Nirlen means taken on or by force of karma. Gi is of. Pungpo is heaps and piles. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about this so that we just have that under our belt. So in Buddhist philosophy, we'll talk about we're made up of heaps or literally piles. like parts. You'll hear us sometimes like we're made of parts. And later on, we'll be talking about how, or there'll be references to our parts. It's like saying, you know, you can say you're made up of two parts, right? Like Western philosophy will be kind of made up of two parts, like mind and body, right? You'll kind of hear it that way. In Buddhism, they divide it up to 5 parts, or we'll call it 5 heaps. And they're things like awareness, form, feeling. I don't know what the other 2 are. I can find out because I should know that. Actually, I haven't read down my notes. But there are basically 5 parts that make up who you are. Okay. So when we're going to be talking about our heaps, that's what that's going to mean. Okay. Gyun is stream. Yangne is again and again. Yangdu is again and again and again. Len is take. Pan is that's what. Korwa is. Thank you. And yin is it is. Okay, a minute to write that down. Heaps, the Sanskrit for that is also skanda, in case you've heard it that way before, which I think is just beautiful. It sounds really pretty. Yeah. It's the bits and parts that make up not just you as a human, but as a sentient being.
I do remember another word, aggregates. It's been used to describe the heaps in some traditions as well.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So the next slide is what the last 2 sentences sums up to. Samsara is the condition of having to take over and over again a stream of impure parts which are forced on you by your karma. I'm going to say that again. I just remember when I first heard this, I was like, what? Huh? It's like the emails that went around about the 3 principal paths. I'm like, what? Samsara is the condition of having to take over and over again a stream of impure parts which are forced on you by your karma. It's basically the condition to be born and the condition to being born and in a suffering realm over and over again because of your impure parts. It's about the elements of how you exist, the parts of you. There's an impurity that was forced upon you by your karma that creates a cyclical nature of suffering, a life of suffering, a cyclical life of suffering.
How do you know how close you are to like achieving?
Getting out? Mm-hmm. So actually everybody has a different level of impurity. It's very personalized to you, lucky for all of us. But you know when you have the direct perception of emptiness is when you know really how close you are.
And the dark perception of emptiness, you just kind of know inherently.
You'll know when it happens. Yeah. It's not something that you're like, oh, I think it happened. Like it's something that you will know because you will see, there's experiences that you will have from what I've heard where you will see how many lifetimes it will take for you to actually reach it. Yeah. to reach it.
Oh.
Yeah, so you will actually have a perception where you actually see how many lifetimes it takes for you to reach enlightenment.
So is that the same thing as correct view?
Um,
Not necessarily.
it's not exactly the same, but it's the same concept. It derives from each other. Yeah. To have correct view is understanding the concept of emptiness and karma together.
But don't you usually perceive dependent origination first? That's what I've heard. How?
Versus what? First before what?
Before you have the direct perception of it.
The direct perception of emptiness is where you see dependent origination.
True.
I've heard it like that it's like direct, like that you.
Well, you
Like
can have
I've
it.
heard like Geshe Michael describe it, like like there's a story about him like making tea for his llama.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking
Yes.
about?
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah.
He was
There-
like, oh, like I'm not really making him tea, but like.
Sure. You can have. I know what story you're talking about.
Yeah.
You can have experiences of dependent origination,
Yeah.
Right.
but that's different than. But you really understand. It's interesting. So all these concepts that we talk about, whether it's dependent origination will be one of them, emptiness, correct view, bodhicitta, samsara. These are all intellectual concepts that we talk about, and you actually really, and this is coming from me, so it's off the record. Let's keep it that way, or off the books. You actually only really understand truly the nature of all these concepts, and when you see the direct perception of emptiness. Dependent origination, I have heard where you could have moments of it
Yeah.
or have understandings of it, but I have never heard that it has to happen before. It doesn't happen necessarily before you see emptiness directly.
I think I've heard what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think it's not that it has to happen, but if you
Right.
have a glimpse of dependent origination, you're
Mhm.
this close
Yeah.
to experiencing emptiness directly. I've heard it said. You will experience it shortly.
Mm.
Yeah.
But
But then once you see emptiness directly, doesn't it take you like 7 to 9 lifetimes to habituate it or something?
Not necessarily. Yeah,
Okay.
it depends. Yeah, it depends where you are in your practice.
You might have already had 6 lifetimes
Mm-hmm.
where you've seen emptiness directly. And when you see it in this lifetime,
You have one more to go.
Uh,
You can also be on a tantric path, and you can also be on an accelerated path. So there just depends on what your
yeah,
practice is.
yeah.
And then we actually do talk about it. I don't know which course it is, but there's what's called bhumis, and there's levels actually
Oh, yeah.
once you've actually perceived emptiness directly.
But there's no like hell, so to say, right? It's either heaven or you're in the cycle.
Oh no, there's
There's
definitely
hell
hell realms.
realms.
Yeah, there's definitely hell realms in Buddhist philosophy.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Oh,
like
it's
cycles,
like-
heaven, then hell once.
Well, there's God realms. There's
yeah,
different realms that
there's
you
hell
have that you can
realms.
be in. Yeah. Well,
That's like course
yeah.
10.
There's different realms that you can be
Got a
in.
long way to go.
No, it's not. Actually, that's, it's interesting. You don't. I mean, well, I shouldn't say you don't, but the fact is that the fact that you're born in the form of how the Buddha looks physically means that you're actually much closer than you think. The fact that you're actually in this room is, and we'll talk about this later today as well, means that you're much closer than you actually think you are. Because you have collected the karma from your past life to be born as a human. And not just any human, but a human who's functioning, who's smart, who has the karma to actually hear the Dharma, in a country, in a state that allows you to do it safely. Like there's all these conditions that you've actually collected, which is a huge thing because there are a lot of people out there who might have a few of those abilities or karmas, right? But not all of them. So it's a really big thing. And we'll talk about it today of what that really means. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So not so far. But that being said, it's one of those things too, I think as like even as a practitioner, there are times where it's like, oh, I can feel it, like I'm gonna get so close, and then you start practicing, you're like, oh my god, I'm so far away. Like I still get pissed off when something happens on the street, or like, you know, and that's when I realized, you know, there's just, it gets more subtle and refined. But yeah, yeah. So samsara is so it's like I said, it's the condition of having to take your life. It's the condition of living your life over and over again in this suffering nature. And the reason why you have that suffering nature is because there are impure parts that you have. So if you were to purify those parts, what would that look like? What would that be?
Purified impurities.
If you were to have pure heaps, what would that look like? You'd be out of samsara. You'd be liberated. And that's what nirvana looks like, right? So when you think of samsara, it's really a collection of your impure heaps that have created that for you. And when you look at liberation, or when you reach nirvana, you've actually purified those heaps. And that's what we're looking at. When you've reached nirvana, for instance, you have purified those heaps, but you can still be you'll still be in the physical form as a human being, but it will be a totally different nature of how you exist in the world. It's also important to know that everything that you are experiencing has been caused by you, right? All of it. So samsara, it's not a place, it's not a condition, it's actually you, right? Does that make sense when I say that? We don't like to think that we're the source of our own suffering, but we are. So when you think about what samsara is, it's to get out of samsara, to liberate yourself from that, isn't changing the scene, which we see a lot, right? Like I have so many friends who are now moving out of New York, and my sister's about to move out. Everyone's had it. Like I can't take it. I need more peace. It's too fast for me. There's all these, and I get it. I have done the same thing, but it's not about moving out to a different place. It's not about breaking up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, right? It's not about even quitting your job that you hate so much. It's a state of mind that you actually change the way in which you think so that you can free yourself and start to understand how you're going to get out of the suffering nature that you've created for yourself. Does that make sense? Okay. And it's interesting because the way that we function with samsara and the way that our life works is that it's not something that you really, like the samsaric nature that you live in today, you don't really have a choice about how that's going to go down, because you've already created the karma in your past to have that happen to you in the moment. You can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to have a samsara-free day today. Just put that on the list, right? It doesn't work that way, right? So when we say that it's something that's been forced upon you, when your past karma is forced upon you for you to have a samsaric existence, past karmic seeds that you planted that have been forced on you for you to have a samsaric existence. And so what you do moving forward is you start to learn how to purify your mind and your karma, which is karma is also defined as the movement of the mind, so that you can start to plant pure seeds and start to purify your heaps. But it's not like a purification like cleaning it down. It's not like scrubbing it down. Like you're not cleaning, it's not like a cleanse type of thing. you actually start to, it's almost like you transform. It's not like you're impure and then you become pure. Like, I don't know, I think about Christianity, it's like you have sin and then you go and you confess and then the sin goes away. It's not like that. You actually, as you start to purify your heaps, you actually become a different, you exist in a different way. Your mind becomes a different person. You're not the same. You're not the same. As you purify, as you get closer, the minute you purify all your heaps and you reach nirvana, you are existing in a totally different state. Does that make sense? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Are the hips kind of like the levels of our being?
They're the things that basically make up who you are and how you exist.
Is it?
They're not really levels though. They're just
Yeah, not, I didn't mean
Oh,
like,
yeah.
like sheets. Like, do you,
like elements, more like that's elements or
Like
parts.
you know, like
Yeah.
in Hinduism, like, or in Taoism, or like yoga, like the koshas?
Oh,
Okay.
no, it's not like no, it's not like that.
Because I would look at that as like, you know, like our mental, emotional, physical body.
Yeah,
And all that, and you purify all that to get to the fifth kosha, which is like bliss. And
Yeah.
So you purify all
Yeah.
the different like sheets of your being.
yeah, okay. Actually, I've never heard it like that, but that works. That sounds like it's very similar. Yeah. 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 Do you have the
Yeah,
heaps?
I have 5.
There's 5. That's good. 5.
Yeah, it's the list again.
Mhm.
So awareness.
Yeah.
Form. Feeling. Discrimination. Wait for it. 'Cause it's the best one. Everything else.
Everything else.
Yeah. Everything in between that they didn't cover.
All the stuff that they didn't talk about. Yeah.
So what were the 5 again?
Awareness.
Mhm.
Form.
Mhm.
Feeling.
Mhm.
Discrimination.
Mhm.
And all the other bits.
And everything else.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It's everything else that is to be perceived.
No.
No, everything else that makes
About
up
you.
you. This is the 5 things that make up who you are as a sentient being. The 5 elements, or the 5 parts, or they'll say the 5 piles, heaps, aggregates, stuff,
Yeah, I heard, I think I'm coming from.
kosha.
There, yeah, I heard it.
That way.
Closer to that
Mhm.
description.
So when we're renunciating, right? If samsara is what we're renunciating, right? So renunciation is samsara is what we're renunciating from, right? If that's what's happening, then when we say we renunciate, it's not about just saying that we want our life to be more peaceful or easier. When we talk about renunciation, we're renunciating not just from saying we want for a better day or a happier day, or we want to be able to achieve our goals, or we just don't want to be sad, or it's not like that. We're renunciating from, because it's not about worldly things. It's about wanting to be out of this life of suffering altogether, completely. Okay. And that's something that's really, like, you have to sit with that a little bit and feel that through and see how that resonates with you. The lowest goal in Buddhist philosophy is to want to stop the continued existence of our body and our mind in the way it exists here right now in the impure state. Okay. So when we talk about renunciation, it's important to understand that it's not just a place where it's like, I'm just fed up. I don't like the way things work. Things don't function the way it used to function. It's not even like that. It's actually that on top of understanding that things don't function the way they don't function, and I just want out. I want out of this cycle that's been perpetuated of samsara. And you'll see it happen a lot too. Like, you know, it's interesting because every one of you at some point will have something that will, and they'll happen in different parts of your life in different ways where you really do get a visceral experience of what samsara must feel like, or it might be. Like I was thinking on the way here about what was a samsara, like a moment where I kind of saw the samsaric nature of my existence and where I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. And there was a time it feels like it was many years ago. It was like 15, 13 years ago, where, and I think, well, let's even back up from that. I realized, like I was thinking, I've lived my life for some reason always very fearful and protective about how I existed in the world. I was very cautious, even as a child growing up, of not wanting to get hurt. And one thing that really came to me about pain was I never wanted my heart broken. That was like a big thing for me. And I don't know what it was. I think it was, I don't know, I was in middle school and I would see older kids that I knew just have like destroyed, like girlfriend, like destroyed. And the guys just, and I just thought, God, that is not a look I want. I do not want that. And it just seemed so painful that I remember kind of always guarding myself, like, and just different parts of my life, just kind of watching people and saying, okay, I'm going to take a note and make sure that I apply that for my own self and make sure that I'm going to try to refrain. I'm going to learn from their terrible experiences. And so in my early 20s, with my strategy in play, right, I decided that I would find out and be able to figure out the kind of the perfect partner. Okay. And doing it in a smart way. It was very, and I realized I was just always playing it safe. So I graduated and I dated a guy in college. He kind of fit the bill. It was safe. I didn't feel like I was going to get hurt. And right after college, a couple of years after college, we got married. And my whole family was ecstatic. It was a great relationship. We were good friends. We traveled well together, you know. And a year after I got married, I remember sitting and looking at this guy and thinking and starting to see this cycle of what was happening live in my life. Because I saw this relationship I had with this man that very much emulated the same cycle that was one generation before with my mother and the generation before that with my grandmother, right? And I can start to see that there was this this cycle that was happening in every generation that was being perpetuated. And I was just perpetuating that same cycle for my life, but for the generations, I don't know. I mean, we ended up getting divorced because I didn't want his kids. But anyway, the life that would have come, right? And there was this kind of graphic moment that happened in this relationship with this man that I remember thinking, if I stay in this relationship, that will be my samsara, right? There was this like suffering nature that I couldn't get out of it. And I was like, I'm out. And I remember thinking it will be so much more, it will destroy me and who I am and my future and my possibility of who I need to be in this world if I stay in this marriage. And I will do whatever I need to do to get out of it. And so I went through a terrible, the divorce was one thing, but my whole family disowned me for years, you know. In the Asian culture, it was just unheard of. But I remember at the time I was willing to do whatever it took to get out of that situation, you know. And that's at a very kind of conventional lifestyle-ish type of level, right? Where you start to have a thing in your life where you realize there's something that's habituated in the way in which you think. And for me at that moment, I thought, I need to change the way I think. I can't do the same thing that I was taught to do. because I went into it thinking this is safe. And in fact, what I went into was the exact cycle of what was going to create a samsaric life for me, right? So we do that in different ways. I had a conversation right before the call, before the class today, of one of my girlfriends who called me, and partners and colleagues and dear friend, and she was telling me how, you know, she just last year she worked so hard and mustered up all this courage to leave a job that she didn't want anymore, and that was a very big deal for her. And she's kind of still kept one foot in the door and one foot out the door because she's quit, but she works like 2 days off-site a week, you know? And she's kind of like, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next, but I'm comfortable because I know them and it's easy money and whatever. And they just called her up today and said, we want to offer you a position for 3 months and to go to London, all expenses paid. You don't even need to stay there the whole time. You can go there for a week and come back and go back and forth. You just tell us what you want to do. And the temptation was so big. You know, she's like, I see it and it was so enticing, right? But she knew by watching it for the first time, she's like, if I see it and it's packaged so great and it sounds so perfect, but if I tip into that, I'm just going to perpetuate the thing that I work so hard to get out of, right? So we do that all in different ways in our lives. So when you're starting to look at samsara, we'll start looking at different levels where you start looking at kind of graphic, gross, when I say gross, not icky gross, but graphic, physical ways that it manifests in your life. They can be relationships that habituate, like really bad ones that come back, you know? But at some point, your mindset starts to shift so that you want to get out of that. And you start saying, there's a certain level of renunciation that happens there where you say, I'm not doing it like that anymore, right? I don't want to be in that relationship anymore, whether it's work or personal, your friends or whatever that is. You say, that's enough. I'm done with this, right? And then you move out of that. In a spiritual capacity, you start to realize that samsara starts to happen. You look at samsara in ways where you look at how people grasp towards what they think actually brings them pleasure. And that attitude, that mindset is what's killing them, right? It's grasping at all these things that they actually think that's going to satisfy and gratify me. So like, for instance, I think about like the experience, I told you guys the situation with my ex-client now who decided to take money out of my paycheck or invoice, right? But it was interesting because in that moment, I'm watching them, and as a practitioner, I see them and I think, you actually think you've served some sort of level of justice on your end by behaving that way, but you've just screwed yourself again, right? Does that make sense? Like when you look at people who do things out of greed, right? Or do things for the wrong reason, when they want more. As a practitioner, you start to realize they're creating that samsaric nature. You wonder why they're so screwed all the time, because you'll start to see it come back. There's a level of unhappiness that will constantly come back because they're just fueling and feeding back into it. And the only way you get out of that is by understanding what it means to have renunciation, and that to actually do this practice, it's changing your mindset to say, at some point you're saying, I've had enough. I'm not doing that anymore. So renunciation is understanding that you are done with the way things are working because you know that they don't function anymore. But it's also a very kind of like visceral understanding that you live in a samsaric nature, that the world that you live in is suffering, and that you want out of that suffering. And you understand that there's a cyclical nature that's happening. If you don't get out of it, it will just continue to perpetuate itself over and over and over again. Okay.
Even in this life.
Yeah, for sure.
Not just.
Yeah, because at some point, as you start to purify your karma, well, as you start to purify your heaps, right? You can in this lifetime, you can actually, you will actually see that you're not perpetuating that cycle over and over again. You can see direct, you can have the direct perception of emptiness in this lifetime, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we're gonna take a break. Does that sound good? There's like a seriously awesome snack table out there. So it was really something. So relish in that, and then let's come back in about 5 to 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah, please go sit.
I had actually a ton from the meeting.
Yeah.
This is, to be honest, like my whole life, I've never really gotten the concept of the afterlife. I guess it's never
Yeah.
occurred to me, and that's why I've never been religious. I was just talking to my boyfriend before this. I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like he like believes in Christianity, like
Yeah.
I get it now. I
Yeah.
guess like
Yeah.
just never like I never cared about other lives. Just
Yeah.
cared about this life. So it's really interesting to me, and I guess
Yeah.
yeah, it's really exciting. Like one of the things I find myself doing is as I like find out who I am in my early 20s, I'm
Yeah.
like trying to find out like what are my passions, like what's
Yeah.
right for me. So I wonder to what extent that's actually driven by like the want for like worldly things. Like
Yeah.
I think like
Yeah.
but like is it okay to do that according to like renunciation?
Yeah.
To like have passions and stuff
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
I guess I just don't understand.
Okay, we're gonna talk about that in class because that's actually perfect.
Cool.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that in
Yeah.
class because we're actually gonna go through 8 worldly things today.
Oh, super cool.
That's actually perfect, and that tees it up really nicely.
Yeah. It's like I have another issue, not issue, another characteristic of myself, which is that I constantly second guess myself because I just have a lot of like brain activity.
Yeah.
So like I've started to wonder, it almost seems like when you grasp samsara and like get out of the cycle. For example, I'm not completely happy in my job right now.
Yeah.
But if I leave, I know I constantly am like, oh, like we just got a new director, it could be a lot better.
Yes. Yeah.
But samsara would renounce all second guessing of yourself, it seems like. If you just decide that you want to get out of the cycle, but then it's like, how do you know
How to get out of the cycle?
or how do you know to give things a little bit more of a chance versus getting out of them too soon?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah. Thank you.
Ooh.
Okay, so let's start with like the second guessing yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I've always been curious about that because I've always done it.
Yeah. It's funny because I've always been that way too.
Yeah.
And then in the last 5 years, my mother looked at me. She's like, "You're very decisive these days." And I'm like, "I know, it's so strange." Because I am. There's just certain things where I'm like, "I'm doing it. That's it. I just get it." You know? And I do think personally it has a lot to do with my practice. That's helped me make certain decisions. The moment you start to be able to gauge what it is that you are trying to do, and you believe in it, or you're at least making the effort to believe in it, then you start, as a practice, you start to align the things that actually participate in making that path happen, or they don't. And you have to just, there's a choice that each individual has to make. And we do it as practitioners. Like, as a practitioner, you know, it's like, okay, I'm deciding that meditating is important. That's a decision I'm going to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know I have to get up early to do it. So it means that night when I'm out with my friends and they want to go out till 11, 12 o'clock at night, but I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. I just know that I just have to make decisions where I have to say, I can't, you know? So the more you have clarity with what it is that you want to do in your life, and with clarity comes conviction, then you're able to, I think, be less indecisive about the decisions you want to make.
Yeah.
And the clarity and conviction comes, in my opinion, with meditating.
Yeah.
It does. Because that's where you have the space where you can start. Because the thing is that ultimately, I believe that you know the answer. You know the answer of what it is you want to do. You just toggle back and forth because
everything?
Yeah, probably. I would say that you probably know deep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Just gotta listen.
Yeah, it's about how do you tap into that. And that's why we talk about, like, the meditation is so much about no, it's really about harnessing the control of your mind, because we actually are victims of our own mind. Our mind has a lot of conversations that we don't know how to have. It's like we don't even know how much we're controlled by it, and it's extraordinary how much we are,
Yeah.
and how it like totally fucks with you all the time.
Yeah.
Like you're like, okay, I get it, I want to do this, and then there's like voices of like, what about that? What about this? Well, what, you know, we'll give it another chance. Come on, just another time, you know. It, and then it plays on your insecurities and your psychological disposition and trauma that you had as a child, and all this stuff comes in, and it's hard to actually gauge who is really controlling who. And then most times, for most of us, your mind controls you,
Mhm.
fear controls you,
Yeah.
right? Whatever that your insecurities control you. You make decisions that aren't really what, like sometimes you'll say like that wasn't my higher self. Well, yeah, most likely it's not, because you know what we do impulsively controls what we do all the time. You know, like I think about girlfriends of mine, and I keep bringing this up, like girlfriends, but you know, just girlfriends of mine who get really jealous, and they're like so embarrassed by their behavior, and they know that's like totally not how they want to be, and I get it, but there's just, you know, like fear kicks in, and some of them have trauma, and you know, stuff happens. So to be able to have a sense of clarity is so important. And a lot of that times it is really about knowing how to control your mind, and to say who's leading the show right now, and actually just observing them, you know. Um, and as you start to go through this endeavor of practicing what that looks like, but then you just really look at the core values that we talk about. Like we, you know, the first class or two classes we talked about just virtue, like what's good and what's not good, just pure virtue, right? Then you can start deciding like what is it that contributes to you living a more virtuous life, you know, and you know you have a good gauge of what's good and what's bad, you know, for the most part.
Yeah.
So if you're working in a condition where you're like, this contributes to me not doing that, you know, or it does, you'll start to gauge that for yourself. And at some point, there is a place where you have to make that decision,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And and samsara is interesting because it's not like we're saying, don't do anything, you know, like, yes, get out of this life and you don't want any worldly thing. That's not, it's not it's not like that. It's having wisdom, and that comes with practice.
Yeah.
It just does. I mean, that's like the worst answer to give, but it's something where as you start to progress and you actually engage in different pieces, like these different nuggets of practice, and you start to employ them, then you can start to actually it helps facilitate your decisions that you're making. Because then you're starting to make decisions based on different things. Like it may not be motivated by money because you understand how money works, or
Yeah.
job security because you understand that there's impermanence in things. You know, like everything is impermanent. Like the idea of like, why should keep this job because it pays me really well, and if I work really hard, I'll get the raise. Well, once you start to understand how karma works, you'll realize that that's actually not how it functions. You know, so
Yeah.
your motivations shift.
Oh.
Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Yeah. 'Cause
So,
it's not
yeah,
by you. It's from a past.
It's from a different, right, it shifts, and so your focus shifts. So the way it looks on the output may look like the same, but your motivation changes, and that motivation and that wisdom you bring will shift the way your karma actually works and the way in which you give, and it just shifts the way, you know. Does that make sense? So it's like you might make a decision and you say, I hate my job, and the person who doesn't have wisdom would say, I hate my job, but I should keep it because it's the best job out there, or you know, it's really secure, or it's too, the status, it's too difficult to change. You know, I've worked so hard to get it so far, like why would I give it up? You know, everyone is telling me I'm crazy for giving up this job when it, you know, it's I get benefits and I have stock options or whatever that may be, right? It looks good on my resume. You have all these things that you would actually have that would originally motivate you to keep in your job, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
That's like, that seems valid and it makes sense, right? A practitioner can look at that same situation and start to look at, why am I keeping this job? What is the motivation that I'm really having, right? How does it speak to my practice, or how does it can I use my job as a place for my practice? Does that make sense? So it's like, maybe I'll keep the job, maybe I won't. It actually really doesn't matter, because it's not about keeping it or not keeping it doesn't make a difference. It's about how I actually view my job. It's not that the job in itself will give me security. The job in itself doesn't give me status. The job itself doesn't necessarily give me money. Like, does that make sense? It doesn't work that way. It's how do I actually start to see how this job functions? Like, yeah, my boss sucks, but there's a new person coming. Well, that my person might suck too, or not. It doesn't really. The thing is, how do you actually view it and start to look at your job with wisdom and say, if I want my job to be better, what do I do karmically to make it better? How do I do that to change that?
Does that work usually if you do something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, you test it and you use your practice. You can actually do that. And you can actually look at your job and say, like, when your boss is being a dick, you can be like, well, start saying, my boss isn't being a dick because I asked him a certain question or because he's having a bad day. That's a karma, that's ripened. So you start to not take certain things personally.
Oh, interesting.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it starts to shift the way you're like, that sucks. I just need to make sure I'm not going to make it to anyone else or moving forward. You know, my job feels like it's really high pressure, and I can't, you know, like I need to, and the I don't know, like I'm having, I'm unhappy. It's not fulfilling to me, you know. But if you look at what your job is for and why you're doing it, like, is there a way to look at it and say, well, how am I actually going to do my work to actually make it easier and better to help the people around me? Right? It's not about serving me. It's about actually being of service to my colleagues and my team and my boss. What can I do every day to make it easier and give my boss, help my boss in the best way possible? Where you're actually thinking about helping them, not about serving yourself. Because in essence, when you do help them, probably you are helping yourself. So then your energy starts to shift, right? And when you start to shift that energy, your whole framework starts to shift. The dynamic in your office and you actually start to shift.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think there's some things left of perception, but that would come.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But that also starts to shift too. Like the perception starts to shift as well. It's interesting that what happens when, like, in situations like that. And I mean, what I would honestly say is you have to test it out and start seeing. And it's not something that happens overnight either.
Yeah.
But if you do the practice, it impacts you differently in different ways. Like when that client had sent me that email to be like, oh, by the way, we decided to just deduct it from your pay. I was like, shit, okay, well,
Yeah.
you know. But in the past, and it didn't really. The thing that I felt was, I felt really sorry for them, and it was strange because I had never felt that way before. In the past, I would have been very like, I need justice. Justice must be served.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll call my lawyer. Maybe I should send a note. You know, at the very least, I should reprimand them for unprofessional, terrible behavior, right?
Yeah.
There's all this stuff that I would normally have done. But for some reason, this time, I was like, that's how they actually feel like they're getting what they want. And little do they know, they're getting totally the opposite, right? Like they always feel like they're always like they're a company that always feels like they have a chip on their shoulder and they're not getting what they want. They don't get what they deserve, right? They always feel that way. But in that moment, as a company, they're doing the exact same thing that they know want done to them, where they feel like I don't deserve this, so they take it away from me. And in essence, what they're doing is other people are coming to them and taking it away from them.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So I see that and I'm like, of course that makes sense. That's the cyclical samsara. That's the samsara that you're creating. This like cycle of suffering that they're just perpetuating constantly and realizing that's not how it's done.
Yeah.
You know? So with so like when you think about work, it's, you know, when you're trying to say like, well, I don't know which one I'm talking towards, the more you have clarity, the more you start to look at what aligns with the thing that you're testing, let's say, put it that way, or just trying out, the more you're going to be able to be like, well, how do I look at it? Like for, right now, the best way to look at things too is just like, what's the most virtuous way to look at situations I'm having? And everything else will actually resolve itself on its own. You know, it's not like, should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I say this? Should I not say this? Should I leave my job or go find a new job? It actually doesn't matter. It's really about what is the intention behind it. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Like the intention of.
How are you viewing it, right? Like, are you saying, should I leave the job or take the job because you look at it self-existently, like that's not going to make me happy, and going to another company
Oh, I
will
always
make me
look at
happier.
it.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because in that moment where you're like, this job doesn't make me happy, but this one will. In that moment, you've screwed yourself because they're both going to make you happy. Because you have to understand that those things in itself don't bring you happiness.
What brings you happiness
Is how you project it. It's your idea. It's what you bring to the table, right? It's your projection that is going to decide if it's happiness or not. And you can change that perception by understanding how karma happiness works.
Got it.
Does that make sense? I
It
know it's
does.
like a long way of answering that.
Yeah, but it's like you need to know the system and learn about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I would say for sure is absolutely start thinking about like how to get a control of your mind, because then you'll start to be able to figure out who's actually like what part of you is the one that's controlling you.
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing.
Yeah. And ignore all like the what ifs.
Because you know, like when you meditate enough, there are certain things where I'll bring it to the cushion and I have all these questions, and I'll usually I can come out of a meditation and I just know. I just know what's, I mean, you know, and you start to be able to know your truth more and more as you start doing the practice, and you don't have as much of should I or should I, you just know.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll start there. And you know what you should do too is, I'm happy if you want to email me questions, you can totally do that.
Yeah.
Or if you want, we can meet after class or before class too, and just go over things that you want to talk about. Yeah, anytime. Or it could be during the week or whatever, we can set up a time. And do coffee or tea or whatever. Okay? Okay? Yep. All right. Can we say Lenyun, Yiching? Lei is karma. Nyun is bad thought. Yi is by. And Ching is chain. What keeps you in samsara? Is Lenyun Giching. It's your karma and bad thoughts that keep you in samsara.
Wait, that's supposed to be bad thought.
Oh yeah. Sorry, bad thought, not though. Bad though. Bad thought.
Find bad.
Oh.
Good one, good one.
Yeah.
Oh God, Hannibal.
Negative thoughts. Non-virtuous thoughts. Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair to say. Anything that's not virtuous would be considered a bad thought.
For example, hatred, anger,
Frustration,
Jealousy.
punishment, jealousy,
greed,
greed, anxiety, desire. We can just go on.
Evil thoughts.
We can do like bumper stickers of bad thoughts. Yeah.
No, that's karma. You're thinking of samsara.
yes.
Yeah, so when you think of nirvana, it's when it's the end of having bad thoughts, which sounds amazing. So when you reach nirvana, you have the end of bad thoughts, which means that you don't plant the karmic seeds to have future bad thoughts. It ceases to exist. So one thing that I will talk about briefly is it's really important that you know about what samsara is, because if you don't understand what samsara is, it's impossible for you to have compassion. Okay, I'm going to say that again. You can't have compassion if you don't understand what samsara is. And you have to know what samsara is for yourself. Because when you have bodhicitta, for instance, right, that's compassion for others, you have to understand what you're being compassionate about. And what you're being compassionate about is the fact that they're living in a cyclical life of suffering, as are you. So if you don't even understand your own samsara, how on earth are you going to understand someone else's samsara? Right? And as a bodhisattva, if your goal is to say that you want to free yourself and all beings, what are you going to free them for if you don't know what samsara is? So, very important to understand what samsara is for you, what it means to you. And maybe what we'll do actually this week, I'll send out an email, but we'll do a samsara photo homework, where we'll take photos of things that you would define your samsaric life. I don't know, maybe that'd be really depressing. But we'll have a mural up of samsara next week up here. I think that's what we're gonna do. It'll be interesting to see what people's samsaric natures look like with their phones. When you think about bodhicitta, and when you think about wanting to help other people, have compassion for other people, in this philosophy, it's not like compassion isn't like, oh, I just want to help him out. I want to give him a job, or give them a place to sleep, or some food, or vocational studies, or support. It's not like that. It's not compassion isn't about supporting someone from ultimately, it's not really about wanting to free them from these worldly temporary things. It's really about wanting to help them get out of suffering ultimately. Okay? And that's what bodhicitta is. When you think about compassion there, it's about wanting to free them from suffering. It's really considered the lowest level of wanting to help them, is to be able to help them get out of suffering. It's like the barrier to entry. It's the basic. It's the baseline. Okay, so it's not even just like, oh, I just want them to be at peace or stress free. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So when you really start to understand samsara, like I don't know, I think about my mother. Like when I think about my mom, she gets really anxious about so much stuff, like especially family stuff. It's just like, I don't understand, but there's so much stress, and there's like, my uncle said this, and my dad said this, and someone said this, and she's trying to and I see it happening, and she gets so stressed out. And as her daughter, and there's this thing about me where it's like, I just want to take it up. I want to take it from her, and I want to help her, right? And I want to ease her pain and suffering. But ultimately, as a practitioner, I'm actually doing a disservice by looking at it that way, because it's that thing isn't what's going to free her. It's a temporary relief, but it's not an ultimate relief. So as a practitioner, if I've taken vows, bodhisattvic vows, how do I actually help her start to see that she's created a certain type of cycle of suffering by the way in which she behaves, right? She doesn't want the anxiety, but what she does when she feels anxious is what? Makes everybody around her anxious. Like everyone's freaking out, right? And I'm like, of course you're freaking out. That's all you do. You just freak out and make everyone else freak out, and then you plant the seeds of freaking out, and it comes back to you over and over again. And she always complains, you know, I'm so anxious. It's all too much. And I'm like, well, you know, it's what is she doing, right? So it's interesting because even as my practices evolve, my conversations with her has shifted, where I'm not looking at temporary fixes or band-aids to the problem. It's really starting to look at what is ways of which she can start to look at how to change her mindset. And that goes the same thing for me as well with my own personal practice of when I start to see the cycle of certain things that keep coming up, it's a time for me to look at, okay, I got to look at this again. It keeps coming up again. Why does it keep coming up? How do I not perpetuate this thing to keep coming up? The thing that's interesting that I think about samsara too is that, you know, sometimes people will talk about like their big crash and burn in their spiritual, like right before, like it's very, very common for Dharma students to come to the Dharma because something tragic has happened in their life or traumatic has happened in their life. And so they'll kind of come because of that. And, you know, it's, you know, people will share their stories of that moment that they really, like they got hit really hard with something in their life. And I've been thinking about that too, because I look at my life and I was never hit that hard, not like the way I've heard from other people in their stories. And sometimes I even thought, well, do you have to be hit that hard to actually understand samsara? And I don't think it's true that you do. So like if you hear people have stories, you know, it's like, oh, like, you know, I remember when I started practicing, I thought, oh, they really understand samsara because they got really hit hard. I don't think that's necessarily the way it works. I do think that there's something about, you almost don't understand what samsara, the nature of samsara is until you've seen the cycle of it, of how it actually functions and works. You know? Like I think about my old boss that I mentioned my first day of class, whose family she lost in a fire. And it's fascinating because I'm not in touch with her now, but I have colleagues who are. And that moment was so traumatic when she lost her entire family in a fire. And something so traumatic like that, which seems like samsara to me, right? You would think that someone like that, or someone who's gone through a situation like that, would manifest in a completely different way. But how she's, what it appears at least, how she's lived her life is kind of more of the same, right? So it's always interesting to see different ways of how people look at these moments that may seem samsaric. You know, and I think as practitioners, it's important to start looking at what is, to be able to get a bird's eye view almost of what is that cycle that's happening. Can we identify that in ourselves and other people, right? Because sometimes when trauma hits, we think it's a one-off, like, oh, that was just that one thing. Someone dies in our life and it's so traumatic. But then what do we do the next day? We just live our life as if we will live every day. Like we assume that we're going to live every day. Does that make sense? Like we don't see the urgency of it the way that we should. And in that moment, when we see something like that, we all, you know, there's something of like, we're living a life in a certain way, signs that happen, and we just are oblivious to it constantly. So just keep an eye out and look at what that means and what does samsara mean for you. How do you do it in small ways all the time? And how do you do it in really big ways? And that takes a lot of evaluation and inner reflection on your part. That's not something that someone can tell you. I mean, they can, but you may not even understand it, you know? Oh yeah. 2 meditations we have to eliminate half of our desires. So there are 2 meditations in the readings, and actually they're in the back part of the reading. If you want to look at the they're not listed out in meditation, but you'll get a sense of what you'd be meditating on. They're considered 2 Lam rims. So Lam rim, when we talked about Lam rim originally, we talked about Lam as path and rim as steps. One thing just to note is that there are multiple, like loads of different Lam rims. They just mean steps of the path. So there are these 2 Lam rims that we're going to be looking at that are meditations to eliminate half of our desires. Can we say Del Nyor Mika? So that's leisure, fortune, to find, and difficulty. So the first meditation is about leisure and fortune, or fortune and leisure. So the 2 meditations we're looking at is eliminate half of our desire. The 2 desires have the 2 kinds of desires have been divided into 2 parts. The first one is there is the desire of things. Sorry, let me just rephrase this. One is where you want the good things in this life, the desire for good things in this life, and one is the desire for wanting good things in the next life. So we're going to be focusing 2 meditations on the desires of what you want that would be good in this life. So when we say that the 2 meditations eliminate half of our desires, it's that half. So this life, not future lives. So the first one is a meditation on leisure and fortune. And this meditation specifically removes the desire for this life. There are 8 things that are in this meditation that I won't be going through, but they're in the readings. You'll see them in the back in the index on number 104 and 105 if you want to take a look at them. But they're basically they're generally things like to have the leisure and fortune that you're born in this life as a human. The fact that you are born in this life intelligent, like you're all intelligent and you're able to process intellectually what we're talking about in class. And you have the ability to be able to cognitively understand emptiness and practice the philosophies of the 3 principal paths. Okay. It's also about having the leisure and fortune of being able to practice, like we had just talked about a little bit earlier, that you're in a country that you have the freedom to practice Dharma, which is a huge thing, that it's safe to practice Dharma, that you have access to it. There are a lot of people in this city alone that don't even know this exists, right? How many of us are in this room tonight? So the fact that you have the leisure and the fortune to be here and to have exposure to it is a huge deal. And so one of the 2 of the meditations is to really meditate on that. Okay.
That's on pages.
It's on, it's points 104 and 105 in the back. Yeah, it's like in the footnote in the back. Mm-hmm. And if you're not reading them, it's always kind of nice to read through them. There's different things in there that aren't necessarily reading. So, okay. The next one is Chiwa. Can we say Chiwa?
Chihuahua.
Mi Takba.
Me taka.
So Chiwa is death.
Oh, me taka.
What's Mi Takba?
Takba. Takba.
Changing things.
Impermanence.
Not
Yeah,
permanent.
gross impermanence. Yeah. So this one specifically is about death. So I was thinking like, when you hear people say like life is short, right? Come on, live life. Life is short. There's something about the idea of life is short. It's like just do whatever you want, or like do the things that you want to do. That's not this. Okay. Life is short.
That sounds sour.
Yeah.
Sure, do whatever you want.
Yeah. You're screwing yourself. Like life is short. Live it wisely. Be smart about it. Do your practice. It's really about the urgency of the practice and understanding it. It's also
Like that conversation?
it also yeah. There's a big in the reading he talks about it more in detail. And in the back of it on points 107 and 108, there's also a list as well.
Something I'd really like to share, which is in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara
Mhm.
by Peace Angel.
Uh-huh.
There's a verse which says, "This boat-like human form, with this boat-like human form, you can cross the great ocean of suffering.
Yeah.
Since such a vessel will be very difficult to ever find again, this is no time to sleep, you fool." So
Yeah.
Shantideva's like pointing out the urgency
Yeah.
of using this precious human
Yeah.
life while you have it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
It's one of yours.
Yeah. It's so true. It's funny because when you think about death, or when you think about life, let's put it this way. When you think about life, I always find it interesting. Like right now, I'm in the middle of my team and I are doing this application that we're applying for this award thing for our company, and they have this like, what's the 3-year plan, 5-year plan, long-term plan, And I always love this like planning thing because we spend a lot of time on what our long-term plan is, assuming that we're going to be alive. But the fact is that we actually have no idea. We just speculate, right? Like, I'm just speculating what I think the 5-year plan might be. So much could change in between now and 5 years or 10 years. But the thing that's most interesting is that the one thing I know that's an absolute, right? Within any of my 5, 10, 20, 30, 40-year plans is that I will absolutely die. That's an absolute. There's no question about that. We know that we're all going to die. Our physical body will die in this lifetime. And yet, how many people in this room actually think about that? Like, knowing that that's an absolute, we don't even think about it as much, but then we think about the things that are totally not absolutes, like they might be changed. We have no idea. It's so strange. And when people die, we are so surprised, as if we thought that would never happen. It happens all the time, right? And it's fascinating in this culture because we don't talk about death very much. Like when I was in Asia, when I was in Korea last year, right now, Koreans are obsessed with long life. It is crazy. I've never seen anything like it. And there's a situation happening where they're forcing, basically when you're 50, to early retire. So there's a lot of young Koreans, and they just are fit, like health and fitness, and they walk around town in the city in full on outdoor hiking gear because they're like so diligent, and they're walking on the sidewalk in the pavement, and you see these huge groups of 50s, 60s, 70s just like eating ginseng and long life, and it's just like yoga and spa, and it's fascinating. And they're taking like I have family that showed me these like little capsules that were like hundreds of dollars for each capsule, and it's like a kit for like a few $1,000s, and it's to help with longevity. I have a set of grandparents. Both my grandparents are actually still alive, and I'm very fortunate. But I have a set of grandparents that spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for stem cell. to be implanted into their, to have stem cell taken out so that they could rejuvenate their life. And I see them now, their body and their mind has completely deteriorated away. For what, right? And then I go to the other part of the world. When I was in Africa last month, it's interesting because there, death is so every day. And you talk to girls and you're like, oh, so do you live with your mom and your dad? They're like, no, my mom died from AIDS. My dad died from AIDS a couple years later from that. And I'm just thinking, oh God, I'm so sorry. And they'll look at me and they'll say, why do you look so sad? And I'm thinking, because your parents are dead. They're like, it happens. People die all the time here, right? And so their concept of death is very different, where they're just, it's like it happens so much. Most of them have family members, parents, siblings, where it's very rare that entire families will actually live to a decent age. By the time they're 30, usually one or two siblings or family members have passed away, if not sooner. And so I see these two extremes. But the thing that's most interesting is with us, how do we actually take wisdom to that? Because I don't see wisdom being applied in either way, right? If you're trying to have longevity and have a longer life, to extend your life so that you can actually do more of your practice, that's one thing, right? If you understand that life you can die any day, right? What would you be doing if you knew what you knew, right? What you know about doing it every day. That's what you'd be doing. But what do most of us do, right? How much of us actually think about the dying process or death? I just read this article right before I came here where a woman entrepreneur, do you know the brand Thinks? I'm sure you guys have seen it, right? Right? Yeah. You guys have seen Thinks? You'll see that it's like a period panty that you'll see. There's like images of fruits and stuff that look like vaginas all over the subway. It says Thinks. Okay. The woman who is the founder of Thinks wrote this article, and she was talking about how she lost 10 colleagues in a building when 9/11 happened. And it just happened like that. She was just like, I go every day to work and I come out and one day they were just dead. Like I have colleagues that just died that I worked with, and it's, we live in a city too, where it's like, we're constantly kind of cautious about, terrorist attack. I mean, there's always stuff like that happening. This world is such a crazy place. And yet how much of, like, if something were to happen now, if you were in a situation now, do you have a practice where you actually know what to do when you're about to face death? What does that look like? How are you going to deal with that? Okay. So that's what this is about. It's a meditation. It's a death meditation. Okay. Important. It's important too, because you just never know when you're going to die. If we're all fortunate, we'll be able to have a general idea. We'll be on a bed. We'll be old, hopefully, right? But you never know. So this really is about just knowing that you just never know when it's going to happen, and the importance of that and the urgency of that. Okay, so we're going to go through the 8 worldly dharmas. I'm sorry for class running late. We can go through these pretty quickly. These 8 worldly dharmas, can we say Jikten? Shugi.
Shugi.
So Jikten is world, Shu is thought, and Gi is 8. So the translation's 8 worldly dharmas. Geshe Michael actually has said it as 8 worldly thoughts, which I thought was quite nice too, to say it that way. They're basically the 8 things that motivate us most of the time. Okay. And they're basically the things that not just motivate us, but they occupy our mind, and they're things that we attach ourselves to quite a bit. Super fun and embarrassing for me, at least. I was like, oh God, this is terrible. Um, the first 1 and 2 is nidam manye. It's getting something and ooh, sorry, I went too fast. Sorry, I'm sorry. Here we go. Getting something and not getting something. Oh, and just so you know, you would want to know this: these 8 worldly thoughts are directly quoted from Nagarjuna. Okay. So getting things, not getting things, getting the job, not getting the job, getting the raise, not getting the raise, right? Getting the car, getting the things, whatever it is that you're looking for. It's about getting things or not getting things. 3 and 4, dedam, mide. Day is feeling good, dam is and, mide is not feeling good. So it's feeling good and not feeling good, or feeling good and feeling bad. Right. So today when we said, who's having a good day versus a bad day, right? We get attached, or how you feel, like we get attached to how we feel about certain things. Happy, sad, angry, joyful. We motivate. The motivation, right? Sometimes we're motivated by how we want to feel, right? Like I think about when I was in Malawi, there was a group of women who were there that were doing some work for some local Malawian students. And it was interesting because when you spoke to them, they were like, I mean, it was sweet that they were there. In all honesty, there's a lot of other things they could be doing. But it was very much like self-serving. Like, we're here because we feel good about ourselves. And they would come and be like, so, what did one woman say? She was like, doesn't it feel so good to be helping other people? And it was interesting because when I asked her what she was doing, one of the projects she had was creating, today's a day of period. So it was creating maxi pads for girls, because a lot of the reasons why girls don't go to school is because they have their periods and they don't actually have sanitary pads. And so she was really excited by it. But what was interesting from what I know from my interaction with the girls in Malawi is that when the girls have like they're reusable pads, basically they're like that you can wash, which idealistically sounds great for Westerners, but for the girls there, they couldn't even wash them because you can't expose that out in the open in public, and there's only one well with running water, so the girls would be embarrassed to wash it, or they would kind of wash it not thoroughly. They wouldn't even dry it fully because there was nowhere to dry. There's no place that you could leave it out in public, so they would stuff it in, right, which is on a dirt floor, and it wouldn't even dry properly, right? So it's interesting because the motivation for these women was it to help them or to help themselves? What was that, right? So really about like when you want to do something, what is your what is the motivation you're doing it for? Like when you see a homeless person and you give them something, is it really to say like, oh, I'm really good, I feel good about myself and that's why I'm doing it, right? Or is it really because you have a sense of understanding the suffering nature in which they live in, right? And there's a feeling of that. Because that's what it does too. That's what karma is. Karma isn't the action. Karma is the movement of the mind. It's your intention. That's really important to think about and know. There's so much power in that, right? So you can do something that looks good, isn't there. You can actually plant a negative seed. Okay, 5 and 6. Dianam. I'm sorry, Niandang.
Niandang.
Sorry, dyslexia. Minyan.
Minyan.
Okay, so it's well known and not well known. Okay, it's like fame. And so fame doesn't mean like, you know, Madonna, fame, that kind of thing. It could just also just getting acknowledgement or being well known. And it actually goes the same with practitioners too. In the reading, Abunga Rinpoche talks about monks, you know, where they're like, you know, there'll be people that practice and will be up in the caves and be meditating and will forego their physical, you know, like the worldly goods of clothing and they'll, you know, but they're like meditating. They really want to be known as good meditators, right? Like they want that acknowledgement, right? Like, oh, that's where he went. That's what he did, right? So, and it happens in subtle ways too, where people will do that as practitioners. So, you know, as you, even in your own practice, watch out for that, where you kind of want kudos of, oh, you meditate every day. Oh, you must be like a, you know, or, you know, when people talk about like retreats, like, oh, you've done so many retreats, right? How long? Where? Oh my gosh, that was like a really hard place that you did it with no electricity and no water and no roof and no anything and, you know, no food, like you didn't eat for whatever. So you get it. So just keep an eye out for that because it doesn't necessarily pertain to, you know, non-practitioners. It's very much relevant to us as in our practice. Okay, 7 and 8. Say to me.
Me.
To is to say something good to you, and me is to say something bad to you. So it's really about having people say nice things to you. It's like, or not. So it's about praise. It has a lot to do with praise. Okay. So I have them listed up here so you can see the overview. So the point of the 8 worldly dharmas is to avoid all of them completely.
Meaning like your mood being affected by what people.
Yeah.
About praise.
No, but wanting praise or not wanting praise. Yeah. Or, you know, praise or having people speak poorly of you. Okay. So, point of the 8 worldly dharmas is to avoid them completely. True or false?
True. To be aware of them and they're dragging you into a non-virtuous state. That they are the causes, perhaps, for your sources of your motivation to stay in samsara rather than get out.
Oh yeah, you can't avoid it.
Let to renounce.
What did you say?
I said, oh yeah, you can't avoid that.
You can't avoid them.
You can't be attached.
You can't avoid these 8 things. It's not going to work. It just, it won't. They will happen no matter what to you. That's just the way it's going to go down for all of us. Yeah, but the question is, how much are you attached to them? Right?
That's what false.
So it's false. That's what Paul was saying?
So it could be kind of like part of the idea that part of the idea that in our karma we recognize that we're going to be getting good things, but don't be living to get the good things. It's okay to have good karma. It's okay to get money.
Yeah.
But don't make that the motivation that causes you to bring about harm on yourself by non-virtuous thought or non-virtuous activity. So in other words, recognize you will sometimes be getting something, you sometimes won't be getting something, but be equivalent, equanimity of feeling towards whether you do get something or don't get something, whether you feel good or don't feel good. It's not bad to feel good, but it's not good if that's motivating you.
Okay.
It's like, why are you doing this thing, right? Like why do you care so much about getting praise at work? Like, is it because
technically you don't even really care if you get the praise or not.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're not seeking for it ever. It doesn't really make a difference. In fact, good or bad, it's all actually technically meaningless in that way, because there's no point to be happy about meaningless things that are conventional in this life, in this world. And there's no point being sad about things that are also conventionally meaningless in this world. Does that make sense? The things about the 8 worldly thoughts that's really a key takeaway, I think, for all of us is it is a way in which you can gauge your level of renunciation by seeing how you relate to them. You can get a sense of your level of renunciation by how when these things come up, how do you respond to them, good or bad? You know, how ignorant are your reactions? The good and the bad, not just to the bad, because I think we focus a lot on the bad. Like we're like, oh, that's okay, that's my karma, you know, and we just try to let it not take it personally. But when good things happen, we take it personally, right? Like we're happy, we're psyched, we earned it, you know, we want everyone to know, right? So it's actually about both. And actually what's most interesting when I look at high practitioners, you'll see that when great things happen and terrible things happen, they walk the middle line. They don't actually sway too much either way, because it really doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. That's not the point. They're not attached to that reaction. They're not attached to someone giving them praise versus someone not giving them praise. Yes.
Something that like comes up a little bit for me with like how do I not get attached is that aren't we ultimately practicing to get out of suffering with the idea of I don't want pain anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want others to have pain.
Yes.
So when good things happen, like I know it's not to not enjoy it.
Yeah.
So like how does that all work?
Yeah. So the goal of Buddhism is to feel good. It is to have happiness, but it's permanent happiness, where these things are temporary levels of happiness, right? There's a big difference in that. Is that when you start to realize how things really work and you get to a certain point, it's a permanent, like you're writing at a different level. And when yeah. Does that answer your question? There was another part of your question though.
It's good.
Is that good?
Well, you seem to be answering or asking the difference between true happiness and this sort of samsaric happiness, which actually leads you away from true happiness. You're
Well,
trying to attain these false happiness.
Yeah,
true happiness.
Yeah, because I remember the other part you're talking about is like when something good happens.
Yeah.
You can enjoy that. You should relish in that joy, and you should rejoice in that joy. But you don't rejoice in it self-existently. You don't attach to it. Does that make sense? You realize just like the negativity, it's something that's ripened for you. You rejoice in it, you celebrate it, and you move on. It's a lot like what we do with our meditation that we started. Things rise and you move on, right? You're like, oh, that's great. I just won $1 million. Awesome. Move on. You know? That makes sense? Mm-hmm. There isn't this sense of like taking it personally and like, you know, and making it a big, like, you'll know when you'll attach yourself to, you grasp towards it, you want it, you know? There's a sense of greed that even comes from it, you know, or a protection of like, it's mine, when even the good stuff happens. And that's how you can start to gauge that. But absolutely, you know, the practice is about wanting to be free from suffering, which is ultimately having ultimate happiness. And we want that. We just want it with wisdom and the right way. These temporary moments, it's just like practitioners that I know, teachers will say like, why even bother? It doesn't even matter. So what? He said something about you, or she said, who cares? Who cares? It's a fleeting moment. It's going to be gone in a second. And something else will happen, which will be good. right? You go into work and your boss is like, you're amazing, awesome, and you feel so good about yourself. You walk in tomorrow and he's like, what the hell happened? And you're like, what? How did that, Does that make sense? So that level of attachment is what you're watching out for. Yes.
So what about level of attachment to other human beings? Are there specific rules about marriage?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, same thing. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so it's relationships are a very, very tricky thing, and in our lineage, I'm just trying to make sure if I can. In our lineage, partners are a huge karmic object. Parents are big karmic objects. Teachers are high karmic objects. But relationships, marriage, is the same thing, where you engage in relationships, even friendships or romantic relationships, in a way where you're not attached to the end result. It doesn't mean that you don't put in the effort, because the intention is important, right? The intention is what creates the karma for the future. So it's not like you go in and say, well, I don't care, nothing. It's not nothing matters. It all matters. All of it matters. It just doesn't matter the way you think it mattered, right? And so you don't go in with this attachment of like, I'm marrying you, we're joined together forever, and this is absolutely it. Because we all know impermanence exists. It's going to end at some point. At some point it will end. You'll die, that person will die, you'll break up, you'll get divorced, whatever, something will, ultimately it will end, right? So you don't have that attachment of forever. It doesn't work that way. And it goes with all things, of understanding that, and when you're in a relationship, all the 8 worldly thoughts for sure apply. I'm going through it, of not wanting that, not doing things, or being attached to, being motivated of wanting these things to happen for you. And it goes the same thing with work, and it goes the same thing with your friends, and it goes the same thing with your families. It's all the same. And so you watch yourself of how much does it really affect me? How much am I motivated by it? But even how much does it affect me when it happens to me? It's this way and that way, right? Which is really tricky, because sometimes, like I think as a practitioner, I think of going this way, like, I'm not going to be attached. I'm not going to be attached. Okay, I'm not attached. I'm not, but then something will happen, and then I'll respond or react, and that reaction is me being attached, which is what creates samsara.
So with empathizing with other people's happiness or sadness, it's
Yeah.
also the same thing. They're happy, so you are. What about that?
About sharing other people's joy
Yeah,
and
sorrow.
grief, and no, I mean, I think it's not, that feels a little different, because you're not, because as a like with bodhisattvic nature and bodhicitta, we do have compassion, and there is a great deal of empathy. There's, it's empathy, it's sympathy, and compassion, right? Has to come into play, right? But it's not, you're not attached to it per se in the way of, like, here's a good example with my mother. I have such great empathy when she gets so anxious, right? That I actually think I can fix the problem. I do, I actually believe it. I'm like, I can take her stress away from her life. But that's not true. I can't, And so when I try to do it, and then she doesn't say something nice to me about it, I get pissed. I'm like, are you kidding me? I just spent all this time and money. What the hell? I was supposed to take your pain away. In fact, I did take your pain away, but you're still saying something to me, right? So it just depends on where that, like, it's subtle. It can come with, you do empathize, but then at what point does it start to other motivations start to kind of seep in, right? Like I have a girlfriend of mine that I'm not such close girlfriends with, and I've been distant with, but she had a baby, and I was like, I'm out of the baby shower. I'm over it. She's not even a very good friend, And I thought, well, I'm gonna be the bigger person and I'll send her a gift because I got an invitation for her baby shower. But I'll send her a gift. So I send her a gift, no attachment. 2 months later, I'm with other girlfriends and they all got thank you notes. I didn't get a thank you note. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I sent her a gift. At the very least, I should get a thank you note, right? And so in that moment, it was clear that although I thought I was acting without attachment, when the response didn't happen the way in which I wanted it to, clearly I was attached, you know? And so I see that. And so we all have those moments where it's like, where is it happening? And it's interesting to see from both sides of where that's happening and to get a sense of your renunciation. Where does it lie? Because if I really had a deeper understanding in that moment, it wouldn't make a difference. You know, good or bad, I don't care. Right? And it took me, I have to say, it took me months to work on it on the cushion to figure out how do I get through that because it really upset me. You know? Okay? Yes.
I know we're out of time, but are we going to talk about the 8 worldly dharmas in future classes, or is this our last shot?
I don't know if we're talking about any other
Well,
classes.
then I've got a question.
Okay,
Why do they call it a dharma? I mean, I know that these
Yeah.
are teachings to us of what
Yeah.
to try to consider as
Mhm.
worldly.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I know that it's the translation for what it was in Tibetan.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why Geshe Michael likes to talk about it as thoughts, because I think,
Because
to
I
your
heard
point,
it
I
said
feel like
the 8
it's-
worldly things,
Mhm.
or someone I think said it was inevitable that we'll experience these,
Mhm.
etc.
On page 6 in the book,
Mhm.
it also says the following 8 worldly thoughts is the name we give to the following 8 emotions.
Mhm.
Emotions, but they're call them thoughts, and as Hannibal said, we can't really avoid them. We're going to experience them. But
Mhm.
we often hear them called dharmas, and dharma means teaching, but it also means
Right,
truth, right?
Yeah.
but it's trying to teach you non-attachment.
I mean, dharma is also thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or truth.
No, thing. Like everything.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's why the translation is so.
Mhm.
I really like Geshe Michael's translation.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
thought. The dharma does mean thing. Because on a very low level, or a very high level, I guess spiritually, everything is dharma. She went to a movie which is not at all about the three
Mhm.
principal paths, but she's at a level much higher than I am, so of course it's about the three principal paths. I didn't see that. But everything is dharma. So dharma is a thing.
Yeah.
So 8 worldly things are dharmas.
Yeah.
Your translation, don't get hung up in the translation.
Yeah.
Like we should, like they
Oh,
showed the
it is.
Matrix here last.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing dharma
Focus on
movie.
the 8.
Unbelievable. Were you guys here for that?
I was now, but
Oh, it's brilliant. If you've not seen The Matrix after having taken these classes, you
Oh, yeah.
must watch it. It
Yeah.
is just sensational.
That's definitely.
My love for Keanu Reeves has just increased exponentially after Speed.
I mean, whoever made the movie started.
Yeah.
Is that?
I don't know who the director was. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can tell.
The
Yeah, yeah.
Wachowski
That's
brothers
not a
are dharmas.
that's not a coincidence for sure.
siblings.
Siblings. Yeah,
Siblings.
brothers.
No,
The
Siblings.
siblings?
correct.
One,
We'll talk about it later.
Sorry,
So
No,
I forgot.
yeah.
So the one thing that I'm going to end class with is at this point in class, like the 5 classes we've taken, these are all concepts that we've been talking about. And the 8 worldly thoughts are really presented to you for you to start struggling with. Okay, that's the point of it. It's for you to start playing with it, seeing it. I would recommend it. I would recommend having them somewhere on you, like on your phone, and just take a look and check in and see where you're doing it, where you're not. It's always interesting to watch. It's kind of like doing a food journal if you've ever done one. Like I always think I eat really healthy, and I have this like, conversation with Armando all the time where he's like, you know, you have a sugar addiction. I'm like, you're kidding. I don't have sugar. I don't ever eat sugar, you know, and then my acupuncturist will have me keep a food journal, and it is crazy some of the stuff that I nibble and I'm a grazer, you know, and I don't even know. Like that wasn't really a meal. It was, you know, thing there. So maybe writing it down might be something just to play around and see how that looks for you. But the thing after this we'll be talking about more and more is the understanding of emptiness, because that's what you really need to have to be able to start looking at your toolkit of how you're going to start tackling these concepts and ideas, right? It's the concept of understanding karma and emptiness together. And we've talked a little bit about karma, but we haven't really gone into emptiness. And so I'm just being clear that we have talked about these 8 worldly thoughts. They're going to be things that you're going to you should and must struggle with for a little bit and see how that feels. But you haven't really been given the tool sets yet by Prabhupada Rinpoche at this point to know how to deal with it. Okay, so for now it's just have fun with it. Watch yourself. Don't be too embarrassed. And I'll send out a little video or a photo assignment this week on maybe the 8 worldly thoughts or samsara, one of those two. I think that might be interesting to do. Okay? Yes.
One question about the homework. We've been doing the shamatha meditations a lot, but in the homework it's saying meditate on renunciation.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll be honest, though, I don't know if anyone else really. I've never really known what to really be meditating on. Now I think we've got a lot more equipment.
Yeah.
What would you suggest for the renunciation meditation for us? Which I believe was contemplation?
Yeah, it is analytical.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? Next class, we'll do a renunciation meditation, and so that we can go over that. We did it once, I think, on the second class,
Yes.
but we'll do it again next time. Yeah. Okay.
Sashi.
Just take a moment and rejoice in the fact that you are able to be here, that you took the time out of your evening, out of your week to learn these teachings. Rejoice that you are physically capable, mentally capable to be able to receive the teachings. Rejoice that there is the Dharma Center that's available for you to receive the teachings. And rejoice that you're able to be here amongst other fellow students to receive the Dharma. And then dedicate the class to someone that you love and that's close to you, wishing them happiness and ultimate happiness and free from a suffering life. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Teacher.
I'm so sorry class was late. It was a heavy topic.